This video is sponsored by ABC Leisure Group for everything to do with canal boats, marina moorings, hire boating, brokerage, chandleries and off-grid electrical equipment. On July 31st, 2019, the emergency spillway on Toddbrook Reservoir in Yorkshire almost burst after heavy rain. Had it done so, the town of Whaley Bridge would have been entirely flooded. It would have been a disaster. Later examination showed the water had been seeping through for years because of a design flaw. At the time, the priority was to patch up the failing concrete with bags of rubble dropped from RAF helicopters. Today, that hole in the concrete looks like this. Behind the spillway, the reservoir remains drained, with a huge set of pipes and pumps keeping the water levels at a bare minimum while the spillway can be dealt with.
4 years after the near disaster, and after months of analysis of the problem, coming up with potential solutions, getting planning permission and holding public consultations, work here has now been underway for around about 9 months, and it's coming along very nicely, so they tell me. But they're not just patching up what was here before. They've decided to install a completely new, much bigger and better spillway system.
2 years ago, when I visited to make a documentary about how water is managed on the canals, the site looked like this. I've left a link to that earlier video in the description. No work had begun then because the planning and consultations were still underway. Now the site is bustling with cranes, diggers and people in high-vis jackets and hard hats. The old primary spillway is being entirely remodelled, and the one that nearly failed is being repaired but then going out of service. It'll just be grassed over and become an edge to the reservoir.
What you see behind you is construction of the new primary weir and tumble bay for the new spillway. That will lead through and behind me, through the dam and then down the hill towards the Memorial Park into a stilling basin whereby water would ultimately flow out towards the River Goyt in the same place as it has done previously.
These computer-generated images from the Canal and River Trust show how the site should look when it's complete. A trickle of water from Todd Brook, the little stream after which the reservoir is named, and which feeds into the pool at the far end, will continue down the side of the reservoir and join the new main spillway. Any overflow from the reservoir will wash over here, be fed round the corner, contained with new concrete walls, and from there out, as Tom said, into the River Goyt.
The new spillway is serving the purpose of both the old primary weir and the old auxiliary combined, so it's got to fulfil that larger overflow capacity, and it's obviously designed to be resilient to very high order weather events for the worst that the weather can throw at it.
The rebuild has proved to be a major undertaking with lots of challenges.
Ground conditions tend to be the most challenging part on most of our jobs because you don't know what's going on underneath the ground until you start breaking through it. You don't know where you're going to hit groundwater when you start digging a hole because it finds its own path. You start digging a hole and suddenly it'll be full of water, and then you've got to deal with that and carry out some of the works to mitigate those dangers and difficulties that you come across.
Almost 1,000 sheet metal pilings have been installed to mark out the new route. Now 500 concrete piles will also be built, followed by lining the waterway with yet more concrete. With the reservoir empty while the work goes on, the supply to nearby canals has been badly disrupted. There are 3 other, albeit smaller, reservoirs locally, but they've been little used, and now they're needed, it turns out the pipes, tunnels and culverts that link them to the canals are in a bad state of repair and themselves need fixing in order to get the water from the reservoirs. Plus, there's an issue you really wouldn't expect in this day and age.
Other people go through the culverts if they don't think they're being used, like the gas services, and if they see an old culvert underneath the road that hasn't got water in it at that time, they just think it's disused and they build straight through it, and then you've got to move all those services. There is a notifying service generally because the feeders are in use, but if they don't know it's there sometimes and they can't see it's being used, they'll just go straight through it.
Even if the pathways for the water haven't been built over, their lack of use means they get jammed up with rubbish, which needs to be cleared before water can flow properly.
You get plenty of modern things in there, like traffic cones and tyres and plastic buckets. If it's been there longer, you'll get things like old Victorian shoes or Victorian bottles in the silt and the sand that get pulled out. The smaller objects won't get in the way of a lot of flow, but then if it's something bigger, like a traffic cone gets stuck in there, you get a bigger build-up of rocks and debris and trees building up behind it. And once that gets blocked by a lot of the smaller debris, it stops all the water going through, and that further builds up behind it. And then when you take that out, you take all the historic debris out as well.
Perhaps recent heavy rain will alleviate the supply problem a little, but for now canal restrictions are in place because of the lack of water.
With the closure of the Macclesfield and Peak Forest canals this summer due to a lack of water despite 4 local reservoirs, the full reinstatement of Toddbrook simply cannot come soon enough, and it's currently scheduled for the end of 2024.